It was just an old couch, ugly, sagging, something I couldn't wait to get rid of. But the man who bought it paid too much, came back asking questions, and left me with a secret that turned my life into a nightmare. Because hidden inside that couch wasn't comfort, it was a fortune worth killing for. You never expect your life to change because of a piece of old furniture. I didn't. To me, the couch was just another thing cluttering up my apartment, another reminder of a relationship I wanted to forget. It was ugly, sagging, covered in a floral print that must have been fashionable in the late 90s. My ex-boyfriend had left it behind when he moved out, and for 2 years I kept it because I couldn't afford to replace it. But every time I looked at it, I saw the arguments, the silence, the way he used to fall asleep on it while I sat awake worrying about bills. So when rent went up again, and I needed extra cash, I decided it was time to get rid of the thing. I snapped a few pictures on my phone, posted them to an online marketplace, and wrote a quick description. Used couch. Comfortable, decent condition. Free to anyone who can pick it up. I thought nothing of it. Within an hour, I had 10 messages. Most people just asked if it was still available. But one stood out. It was from a man named Ethan. His profile picture was nothing special, a blurry shot of a baseball cap, pulled low, no smile, no details. His message was short. Is the couch still there? I can come tonight. Cash in hand. I hadn't even asked for money, but I wasn't going to argue. That night, around 8, he showed up. I expected some college kid looking for cheap furniture, but this man was different. Tall, late 30s maybe, with sharp eyes that scanned the room like he was memorizing everything. He didn't smile. He didn't make small talk. Nice couch, he said flatly, running his hand along the armrest. I laughed. If you say so. It's all yours if you can carry it. He pulled a few folded bills from his pocket, 20s crisp, like they'd never been used. 200. For your trouble. I blinked. It's free. Take it. I hesitated, but took the cash. $200 was more than I'd make in a week waiting tables. He lifted the couch like it weighed nothing, carried it out the door, and loaded it into the back of a pickup truck. Before he left, he looked at me for a long second, like he wanted to say something but changed his mind. Then he drove off without another word. I stood there in the doorway, holding the money, wondering why anyone would pay for that couch. At first, I thought nothing more of it. The apartment felt bigger without it, and I enjoyed the extra space. But later that night, while sweeping up the dust left behind, I noticed something on the floor where the couch had been. A folded piece of paper, yellowed with age, wedged between the baseboards. I picked it up and opened it. Inside was a short note, handwritten in block letters. Look deeper. The past hides what the future can't forget. I froze. It looked old, decades old. The ink had faded, but the message was clear. At first, I thought maybe my ex had put it there as some weird joke. But he was never that clever. And the handwriting wasn't his. I couldn't stop thinking about it. The next day, I went to work, tried to focus on serving coffee and balancing trays, but my mind kept drifting back to that note. When I got home, I searched the spot again, but there was nothing else. And then 3 days later, I got another message. It was from Ethan. Do you still have the couch? I frowned at the screen.
Why would he ask that?
He had it. I saw him take it. I replied. No. You picked it up already. No answer. That night, I dreamed about the couch. In the dream, I was reaching into the cushions, pulling out handfuls of paper, money, photographs, things I couldn't quite make out. When I woke up, my heart was pounding. I told myself I was being ridiculous. But curiosity is a dangerous thing. The next evening, just as the sun was going down, I heard a knock at my door. When I opened it, Ethan was standing there. Hey, he said, voice low, unreadable. I need the couch back. I stared at him. What are you talking about? You already took it.
His jaw tightened.
It's important. Did you find anything in it? The way he asked, sharp and urgent, made my stomach twist. No, I lied. Just dust. He studied me for a long time, his eyes flicking over my face like he was searching for a crack. Finally, he nodded once. If you hear from anyone about it, you call me. Understand? Before I could answer, he turned and walked away. That was the moment I realized something was very wrong. I didn't know it yet, but selling that couch was the beginning of a story I would never escape. Because the couch wasn't just furniture. It was a hiding place, and I had already touched the secret inside it. After that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd made a mistake. Ethan's visit stuck in my head like a splinter. The way he asked if I'd found anything. The way his eyes searched mine, sharp and hungry, like he already knew the answer. And the way he left, without giving me his number, but still demanding that I call him if anyone asked about the couch. I barely slept. Every sound in the hallway made me sit up in bed, straining to listen. Every shadow on the wall looked like someone standing there, waiting. By morning, I told myself I was being paranoid. That couch had been in my living room for 2 years. If there was anything hidden inside it, I would have noticed by now, right? Still, I couldn't stop thinking about that note I found wedged behind the baseboard. Look deeper. The past hides what the future can't forget. I hadn't told Ethan about it. Instinct told me not to. But the words echoed in my mind until I finally gave in. That night, I drove across town to the thrift store where I used to work in high school. I told the guy at the counter, a friend of a friend, that I wanted to buy a couch. Not a new one. Just any old couch with loose cushions and torn seams. When I got home, I locked the door, pulled on some gloves, and went to work. I turned that couch inside out. Checked the seams, the stuffing, the frame. I tore the fabric with scissors and dug into the foam. Nothing. But it taught me something. There are a lot of places you can hide things in a couch. The next day, I called my friend Jess. She's the kind of person who watches too many true crime documentaries, and I knew she'd at least listen. Okay, hold on, she said after I told her the story. This guy shows up, pays you for a free couch, then comes back days later to ask if you found something inside it? Girl, that's not normal. I know, I said. But what could be so important that he'd risk coming back? It's just a couch. Unless it's not. Jess had a point. That night, I dreamed again. This time, I saw Ethan carrying the couch through a tunnel, his face hidden in shadow. And when he set it down, it wasn't a couch anymore. It was a coffin. I woke up in a sweat. The following week, things got worse. I came home from work one evening and found my apartment door cracked open. My first thought was that I'd forgotten to lock it. But when I stepped inside, my stomach dropped. The place had been searched. Not trashed, not the way burglars do it, pulling drawers out and smashing things. This was careful. Precise. The cushions on my new couch were unzipped. The closet doors were open. Even the baseboards had been pried away. Whoever it was, they were looking for something. I felt my knees go weak. I checked my bedroom, the bathroom, every corner. No one was there. But when I walked into the living room, I noticed something that froze me in place. On the floor, right where the old couch had been, someone had left a cigarette butt. Still warm. And I don't smoke. That night, I called Jess again. My voice was shaking as I told her everything. You need to call the cops, she said immediately. I did. I told her. They came, they looked around. They said there's no sign of forced entry. No evidence. Just told me to lock my doors and be careful. Be careful? That's it.
Yeah.
I don't think they believed me. There was a pause. Then Jess said, listen, what if the money's in the couch? What money? She lowered her voice like someone could hear her through the phone. Drug money. Dirty money.
Something.
Think about it. People don't just hide love letters in couches. They hide cash. I wanted to tell her she was being dramatic.
But the more I thought about it, the more it made sense.
Ethan had paid me $200 for a couch worth maybe $20. Then he came back, desperate, asking if I'd found something. And now, someone had broken into my apartment, careful enough not to take anything, but desperate enough to search the walls. If there really was money in that couch, how much could it be? A few hundred? A few thousand? I thought back to the crisp 20s Ethan gave me. Money that looked untouched. My pulse quickened. I didn't know it yet, but I was already caught in the current. Already being pulled into something much bigger than me. And when the couch came back into my life one final time, it wasn't carrying comfort. It was carrying secrets. And a fortune worth killing for. The night of the break-in changed everything. Up until then, I could almost pretend the couch was just a weird coincidence, a fluke. But standing in my living room, staring at that still warm cigarette butt on the floor, I knew somebody had been watching me. And they weren't just after furniture. For the next week, I jumped at every sound. I kept the curtains drawn tight. I double-checked the locks 4 times before bed. Jess stayed on the phone with me most nights until I finally drifted off to sleep. She told me I was spiraling, but she also admitted she didn't like the sound of it either. Then one night, just before closing time at the cafe where I worked, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Check the couch. That was all it said. I froze, the plate I was carrying almost slipping from my hand. Nobody should have had my number except friends, family, and my boss. My heart started pounding as I looked around the cafe. There were only 2 customers left, an old man sipping tea and a woman scrolling her phone, but suddenly I felt like every eye in the place was on me. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I tore into the cheap thrift store couch I'd bought as a replacement. I dug through the foam, clawed at the seams. Nothing. But I wasn't even looking for anything real. I was just panicking, my hands shaking, my brain replaying those words over and over. Check the couch. The next morning, I couldn't take it anymore. I called Ethan. Yes, I'd saved his number, even though I told myself I hadn't. When he answered, his voice was sharp. You shouldn't be calling me. Someone broke into my apartment, I blurted. They were looking for it. The couch. Silence. Where is it? He asked finally. You tell me, I snapped. You're the one who took it. Another pause. Then, don't go looking. If you already found something, get rid of it. Burn it if you have to. Found what? He didn't answer. The line went dead. That should have been the end of it. Any rational person would have dropped it right there. But I couldn't. I had $200 in crisp 20s burning a hole in my dresser drawer, a creepy note hidden in my nightstand, and a gnawing sense that I was in way over my head. So the next day, I went looking for the couch. I retraced everything. I drove by the thrift store, the dump, even searched the online marketplace for anyone reselling it. Nothing. But fate has a funny way of pulling you where it wants you. A week later, on my way home from work, I spotted a moving truck parked outside an abandoned warehouse on the edge of town. The back was open. Inside, stacked against the wall, was a row of old furniture, including my couch. I swear my heart stopped. I parked down the block and crept closer, praying nobody saw me. And there it was, the ugly floral pattern, the sagging cushions, the same rip in the armrest. My couch. When I reached it, I slipped my hand into the torn seam. And that's when I felt it, something hard, wedged deep inside the frame. I tugged until my fingers closed around it and pulled. Out came a small, leather-bound book. A ledger. The cover was cracked and faded. The pages inside were filled with names, numbers, and strange symbols. Some names had addresses scrawled next to them. Some had red XS drawn through. I stood there in the half-dark, the book trembling in my hands, realizing I was holding something I was never meant to see. Suddenly, a voice rang out from the shadows. What the hell are you doing? I spun around. Ethan stood there, half lit by the glow of a single overhead bulb. His jaw was tight, his eyes burning. You shouldn't have come here, he said, stepping closer. I clutched the ledger to my chest. What is this? Put it back.
No.
Not until you tell me what's going on. His nostrils flared. For a moment, I thought he was going to grab me. Instead, he hissed. That book doesn't belong to you. It belonged to my father. And if you're smart, you'll forget you ever saw it. I stared at him. His father? Before I could say another word, he reached into his jacket. My blood ran cold. I thought he was pulling a gun. But instead, he pulled out a lighter. I'll burn it right now if I have to, he said. Better ash than in the wrong hands. But something in his voice told me he wasn't bluffing. And suddenly I knew that ledger was worth more than money. It was dangerous. And now I had touched it. I backed away slowly, clutching the book, my mind racing. Because I had a choice. Give it back and hope this nightmare ended. Or keep it and find out what secrets were worth killing for. When I left that warehouse with the ledger tucked under my jacket, I knew two things for sure. One, I had just stolen something that didn't belong to me. And two, my life would never be the same again. That night, I couldn't sleep. I spread the ledger open across my kitchen table, my hands shaking as I turned the pages. It wasn't just names and numbers. It was a record. A map of debts, deals, and transactions that stretched back decades. Some entries were simple. Martinez, 50K, May 14th, 79. Silva, 20K, September 22nd, 83. Others were more cryptic, like Hollow Pines delivery, handled. Carter, silence, 15K. And then there were the XS, red, angry slashes drawn through certain names. Every one of those names had a date next to it. A final date. Dead men don't pay debts. I stared at those pages until the words blurred. My stomach churned. This wasn't just some forgotten notebook. This was evidence. Proof of crimes. Proof of a history I wasn't supposed to know. And if Ethan was telling the truth, it had belonged to his father. A man I could only assume had been involved in things darker than I ever wanted to imagine. I should have burned it. I should have driven straight to the police. But instead, I hid it. Slid it into the back of my closet under a box of winter clothes. Out of sight, but not out of mind. Because a part of me, a reckless part one didn't even know existed, whispered that maybe this ledger was a ticket. A way out of my dead-end job, out of scraping by paycheck to paycheck. If money had been hidden in that couch once, who was to say there wasn't more stashed somewhere else? And now, I had the map. The next day, Jess noticed something was wrong the second she saw me. You look like you haven't slept in a week, she said. What's going on? I hesitated. Then I told her. Everything. Her eyes widened as I laid the ledger on her kitchen counter. She flipped through the pages, her mouth hanging open. Do you know what this is? She whispered. This is a death sentence. People kill to keep things like this quiet. I know, I said softly. Then why are you showing me? Because I can't do this alone. She pressed her hands to her temples. Oh my God. You have to take this to the cops. They won't believe me, I said. And even if they do, what happens then? They put it in evidence, and I'm left with nothing but a target on my back. Jess slammed the book shut. You're already a target. That night, I walked home with the ledger tucked in my bag, her words echoing in my head. And that's when I realized I was being followed. It started as a shadow in the corner of my eye, a figure lingering half a block back. At first, I told myself it was coincidence. Just someone else walking home. But every time I sped up, so did they. Every turn I made, they mirrored. By the time I reached my apartment, I was running. I slammed the door shut behind me, locked every bolt, and stood there in the silence, my chest heaving. I peeked through the blinds. A black car idled across the street, headlights off. Just sitting there, waiting. The curse of the couch had found me. Over the next few days, the paranoia grew. The car kept showing up. Sometimes at night, sometimes in the morning, always at a distance. Then the phone calls started. No words, just silence. Breathing. I stopped answering. By the fourth night, I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed the ledger, stuffed it in my backpack, and drove. No plan, no destination, just anywhere but here. But paranoia has a way of sticking with you. Every set of headlights in my rearview felt like a threat. Every stranger at a gas station felt like they were watching me. Finally, I pulled into a rest stop off the highway and collapsed against the steering wheel, shaking. I pulled out the ledger again, flipping to the back. That's when I saw something I hadn't noticed before, a fold-out map tucked into the binding. It was hand-drawn, lines and notes scribbled across faded paper. At first glance, it looked like nonsense. But then I recognized a name, a location. Hollow Pines. The same phrase that had been written in the ledger, next to one of the oldest entries. And under it, scrawled in the same hand, final drop. My blood ran cold. This wasn't just about debts and names. This was about a stash. A fortune. Something hidden out there, waiting. And I realized, with a mix of fear and excitement, that maybe the couch wasn't the treasure at all. Maybe it was just the key I didn't decide to go to Hollow Pines overnight. It took days of pacing my apartment, staring at the ledger like it was a loaded gun on my kitchen table. Part of me wanted to burn it, erase it from my life before it erased me. But every time I thought about fire, I remembered the map folded into the back, hand-drawn, lines crisscrossing like veins, with a single phrase written in block letters. Hollow Pines. Final drop. It wouldn't leave my head. The car outside my building hadn't left either. It wasn't always the same car, but there was always one, headlights off, windows tinted, waiting. I'd peek through the blinds at 2 a.m., and there it would be. Patient. Watching. I couldn't stay. I couldn't ignore the pull anymore. So early one Saturday morning, with the sun bleeding over the horizon, I packed a flashlight, gloves, a crowbar, and the ledger into my backpack. I told myself it was just to satisfy curiosity, that I'd look, confirm there was nothing there, and leave. But deep down, I knew better. I was chasing something. The drive out was suffocating. The further I went, the fewer signs of life I saw. The gas stations turned to boarded-up shacks, the highways to cracked asphalt. By the time the Hollow Pine sign appeared, rusted and leaning sideways, I'd already chewed my nails down to nothing. The town was worse than I'd imagined. Half-collapsed houses, broken windows staring like blind eyes, silence pressing down so heavy I could hear my own heartbeat. Not even birds sang here. It felt like the whole place was holding its breath. The map led me to the center of town. The old church still stood, barely. Its steeple was bent like a broken neck, the double doors sagging on rusted hinges. I hesitated at the threshold, one hand pressed to the wood, listening. Nothing. Just silence. Inside, the air was damp and smelled of rot. Dust motes drifted through beams of sunlight cutting down from holes in the ceiling. The pews were warped, splintered, but arranged neatly, as if waiting for a congregation that would never come. At the far end, near the altar, half hidden under debris, I saw it. A trapdoor. The map hadn't lied. It took everything I had to pry it open with the crowbar. The wood groaned, then gave way, revealing a narrow staircase leading underground. Cold air rushed up to meet me, sharp and metallic, like the smell of old coins. I descended slowly, flashlight trembling in my grip. The cellar stretched wide, walls lined with stone, the ceiling dripping condensation. And there, stacked neatly against one wall, were wooden crates. I dropped to my knees, pried the lid off one, and froze. Cash. Bundles and bundles of it, wrapped in rubber bands, aged but intact. 10s, 20s, 50s, all stacked like bricks. More money than I had ever seen in my life. I laughed then, a shaky, wild laugh that echoed in the dark. My hands shook as I tore open another crate and another. All the same. Cash. Millions, maybe. It was real. All of it. But as the sound of my laugh died away, another sound filled the silence. A voice. Took you long enough. I spun around, flashlight beams slicing through the dark. Ethan stood at the bottom of the stairs. His face was pale, drawn, eyes burning with something I couldn't name. In his hand was a gun. The sight of it froze the air in my lungs. "I knew you'd figured out," he said, stepping closer. "You had the ledger. All you had to do was follow the trail."
My mouth was dry.
"You were following me. Of course. You think I'd let some stranger walk away with my father's work? This," he gestured to the crates with the gun. "This belongs to me." My stomach twisted. "Your father's money? How many people died for this?"
His jaw tightened. "Enough."
"And if you're smart, you'll stop asking questions. Help me move it, and maybe I let you keep a piece." I stared at him, my flashlight shaking in my hand. Millions in front of me, a gun pointed at my chest, and one truth sinking into my bones. The fortune wasn't salvation. It was a curse, and I had just walked straight into it. I should have run, dropped the flashlight, bolted up the stairs, and never looked back. But my legs wouldn't move. My brain was locked on the gun in Ethan's hand, on the crates stacked like coffins behind him. "Here's how this works," he said. "We load it up, get it out of here, and you disappear. No cops, no games. You get a cut for your trouble, and that's the end of it." I gripped the crowbar tighter. "And if I say no?" His eyes narrowed. "Then I bury you down here, with the rest of my father's secrets." The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the drip-drip of water from the ceiling. I could hear my pulse in my ears. Finally, I lowered the crowbar, pretending to give in. I took a step toward the crates. Ethan lowered the gun just slightly. And that's when another voice cut through the darkness. "Drop it, Ethan." I froze. My stomach dropped. At the top of the stairs stood Jess, her silhouette framed by the faint light from above. Her hands were trembling, but the pistol she held was steady, aimed right at him. "Jess," I started, my voice shaking. She didn't look at me. "I followed you. I knew you were hiding something." And I was right. Ethan's laugh was low, bitter. "Cute. The friend joins the party. You really think you can pull that trigger?" Jess's jaw clenched. "Try me." For a moment, the three of us stood frozen, me with the crowbar, Ethan with his gun, Jess with hers. The air was electric, waiting to snap. Then Ethan smiled.
"Slow. Cold. Fine."
He raised the gun. The shot rang out like thunder. I flinched, expecting pain, but it wasn't me. Ethan staggered back, clutching his shoulder, the gun clattering to the floor. Jess had fired first. "Run," she screamed. I didn't wait. I grabbed her hand, and together we bolted up the stairs, my flashlight beam bouncing wildly against the walls. Behind us, Ethan's ragged breathing echoed in the dark, along with his words. "You can't run forever." We didn't stop until we reached the car. My hands fumbled with the keys, my chest heaving, gravel spraying as the tires caught the road. We drove in silence, the forest blurring past, the weight of what just happened crushing down on us. Finally, Jess broke the silence. Her voice was low, trembling. "Do you still have the ledger?" I glanced at the backpack on the floor, heavy with secrets. "Yeah." She stared straight ahead, her face pale. "Then this isn't over. Not by a long shot." And she was right, because that money, that cursed fortune, was still sitting in Hollow Pines, waiting for someone bold or desperate enough to claim it. And the ledger in my bag? It wasn't just a record of the past. It was a map of the future. And as long as it stayed in my hands, someone would always come looking. I swore I'd never go back. After Hollow Pines, after Ethan's blood and Jess's shaking hands pulling the trigger, I promised myself that was the end of it. Let the money rot in that cellar. Let the town sink into the dirt with all its ghosts. But promises don't silence hunger. They don't quiet debt collectors or stop the late-night panic of knowing someone out there is still watching. And they don't erase the memory of crates stacked to the ceiling, each one stuffed with enough cash to buy a new life. The ledger sat in my closet for months, wrapped in an old towel, like it could burn me if I touched it barehanded. Every so often I'd pull it out, flip through its pages, trace the map with my finger. Until one night I stopped fighting. Jess didn't know. I didn't tell her. I couldn't. After what she'd done, after she pulled the trigger and saved me, I couldn't ask her to crawl back into that darkness. This was mine to carry, mine to finish. So I drove. Again. Back through the cracked roads and whispering trees, back to Hollow Pines. The town hadn't changed. If anything, it looked worse. More collapsed roofs, more vines choking the houses. But the church was still there, waiting. The trapdoor groaned like it remembered me. The cellar air was colder this time, heavier, as if it knew what I'd come for. The crates were still there, untouched. Ethan hadn't made it back. Or if he hadn't made it far. I didn't laugh this time when I pried them open. I didn't tremble or gawk. I just started working. It took hours. Days really. Multiple trips with rented vans, cash stuffed into duffel bags and hidden beneath tarps. Every time I left that cellar, I expected headlights behind me, shadows in the rear view. But no one came. When the last crate was gone, I stood in the empty cellar, flashlight beams sweeping over the damp stone. The ghosts were still there, but the weight was gone. Hollow Pines had given up its secret. I drove until the forest thinned, until the highway straightened, until the skyline of a new city rose up around me. Somewhere far enough that the air felt different. I found a cheap apartment. Paid cash, no questions asked. For the first time in my life, I felt the chains loosen. But here's the thing about cursed fortunes. They don't vanish just because you spend them. I tried to live quietly. Paid off debts. Bought a reliable car. Kept my head down. But every time I saw someone on the street, someone curled up on cardboard, shivering against the cold, the money burned hotter in my pocket. So I started small. Anonymous envelopes slipped under shelter doors. Groceries paid for strangers. Rent covered for families on the brink of eviction. It grew. A community kitchen. A handful of beds. Job training for people who'd been invisible for too long. They never knew my name. To them, it was just a gift from nowhere, a chance to stand up again. And for a while, it worked. The money stretched, multiplied, turned into something clean. For once, the fortune felt less like a curse and more like a weapon I could turn against the darkness that created it. But the past doesn't sleep. One night, as I locked up the kitchen, I saw a man watching from across the street. A face I didn't recognize, but the way he stood, still, patient, eyes following every move, made my stomach knot. The couch. The ledger. Hollow Pines. It wasn't over. It might never be. But for the first time, I wasn't running. I had roots now. People who depended on me. And if the curse came knocking again, I wasn't the same person it first found. I wasn't afraid anymore.